He married a defiant girl for a bet, but her purity made the millionaire believe in love again. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The ballroom glowed with gold light and laughter. Champagne glasses clinked softly. Millionaire CEO Alexander Reed stood near the marble bar, his jaw tight as a group of investors surrounded him, waiting for his reaction. He had just lost a high-stakes negotiation that bruised his pride. One of them, Damon Cole, a smug venture capitalist, smirked. "You can close any deal, Reed, except a real relationship." Laughter broke out. Alexander's lips curved into a dangerous smile. "You think so?" Damon leaned closer, his tone taunting. "I bet you cannot make a woman fall for you, much less marry you in 1 week." The room went quiet. Alexander swirled the amber in his glass, eyes sharp. 1 week? He set the drink down. "Fine. Name the woman." Damon chuckled, pulling up a photo on his phone. "Her. The cafe girl who spilled coffee on you last month. Lila Evans." The name landed like a spark. Alexander remembered her, the fierce young woman with hazel eyes who had refused to apologize, even when hot coffee drenched his tailored suit. "Maybe next time you will learn some manners," he had told her coldly. She had glared back. "Maybe next time you will act like a human being, not a headline." The memory still made him smirk. "All right," Alexander said softly. 7 days. I will make her say I do." Whispers spread through the ballroom like wildfire. But for Alexander, it was not about the crowd. It was about control, about proving that emotions were just numbers on a deal sheet. 2 days later, his sleek black car stopped outside a small café, tucked between a laundromat and a thrift store. Inside, Lila Evans wiped down tables, her ponytail loose, humming quietly to herself. Her life was small but honest. She worked double shifts to pay rent and cover her mother's hospital bills. When the doorbell chimed and Alexander Reed walked in, she froze. He looked out of place. Impeccable suit, calm authority, eyes that missed nothing. "You," she said cautiously, gripping the tray. "Do you want another coffee to spill?" Alexander smiled faintly. "Actually, Miss Evans, I came to make you an offer." "An offer?" she echoed. He placed a sleek black envelope on the counter. "I need a temporary wife. For a month. You will be well compensated. You will not have to pretend outside of public appearances. Think of it as a contract." Lila blinked. "You cannot be serious." "I am always serious," he said quietly. "You have debts. I can solve them. All I ask is that you play your part." Her heart pounded. Every instinct screamed no, but her eyes drifted to the corkboard behind him, where her mother's medical bills hung like ghosts. The cafe clock ticked loud enough to drown her thoughts. "Why me?" she asked finally. Alexander's gaze softened, just a fraction. "Because you are the only one? Whoever told me the truth to my face." The world seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Lila exhaled. "Fine. But if this is some kind of joke, I walk." "It is not a joke," Alexander said. He extended his hand. She hesitated, then placed her palm against his, a deal sealed in silence. Neither of them knew it yet, but that handshake born from pride and desperation was about to rewrite both of their lives. The morning sun spilled through the tall glass windows of Alexander Reed's penthouse, painting gold across the marble floors. The air smelled faintly of espresso and leather. Lila Evans stood in the entryway, clutching a small suitcase, her nerves trembling like thin glass. It had been 3 days since she had shaken his hand in that cafe. 3 sleepless nights replaying the moment she had agreed to a marriage that was not real. She told herself it was only a job 30 days, 1 contract, nothing more. But as she stepped into the world of wealth that Alexander lived in, she felt the distance between them stretch like an ocean. Alexander appeared at the top of the staircase, dressed in a crisp navy suit, adjusting his cufflinks with practiced precision. He did not look like a man who needed anyone, yet, for reasons she could not explain, he made her heart skip. "Good morning, Miss Evans," he said smoothly. "From today, it is Mrs. Reed." She blinked. "That fast?" He handed her a folder. "Our lawyer arranged the paperwork. A simple civil ceremony at City Hall. It will be over in 15 minutes. M?" Her throat tightened. "And after?" He smiled faintly. "After, we begin the act." The ceremony was quiet, efficient. No guests, no flowers, just a pen and a promise neither of them meant. When the clerk stamped the document, Alexander turned to her and said softly, "Congratulations, Mrs. Reed." His tone was formal, distant, like a man closing a deal. That night, the mansion felt too big. Lila explored the hallways lined with art and silence. Every step echoed. A housekeeper had shown her to her room separate from his, as agreed. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the diamond ring on her hand. It was perfect, cold, and heavy. Across the hall, Alexander stood by his office window overlooking the city. He watched the lights flicker across the skyline and told himself it was just a bet, nothing more. Yet, the image of her standing in that plain white dress, refusing to smile for the camera, lingered longer than he wanted to admit. The next morning, his world and hers collided again. The front gate buzzed with reporters. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire marries a waitress!" Flashing cameras followed them as they stepped out together for their first public appearance, a charity brunch at the Riverside Hotel. "Just stay close and smile," Alexander murmured under his breath. "They feed on discomfort." Lila nodded, clutching her purse. The marble lobby sparkled like a movie set. Everywhere she looked, there were diamonds, champagne, and eyes watching her. A woman in pearls whispered loudly enough to hear, "Who let her in?" Lila froze, her face flushing. Before she could react, Alexander placed a hand gently on her back, steering her forward. "Ignore them," he said softly. "They only see what they cannot understand." During the brunch, an investor's wife asked Lila in a sweet but cutting tone, "So, Mrs. Reed, how does it feel to go from serving coffee to serving the elite?" Lila smiled, steady and clear. "Money changes where you stand," she said, "but not who you are." The table went silent. Alexander's eyes met hers, and for the first time, he felt something strange respect. Later, in the car, he broke the silence. "You handled that well." She shrugged. "I have had practice. People underestimate you when you do not have money." He glanced at her, a small smile ghosting across his lips. "They underestimate me too, but for different reasons." Back at the mansion, the night was quiet again. Lila walked into the study, finding Alexander reading by the fireplace. Papers and contracts were spread before him. She hesitated at the door. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" He looked up, surprised. "Pretending? That you have everything," she said. "It must be exhausting." For a moment, he said nothing. The flames flickered against his face, softening the hard lines. "Having everything does not mean feeling anything," he said finally. Their eyes met in the dim light, two strangers bound by paper, both carrying loneliness money could not erase. When she turned to leave, he spoke quietly. "Lila." She stopped. "I know this arrangement is temporary," he said, "but while it lasts, I want you to feel safe here." Something in his voice made her chest tighten. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, returning his gaze to the fire. "Good night, Mrs. Reed." End 1. She walked back to her room, her heart confused. This was supposed to be simple, a contract, a paycheck, a month. Yet every word he said, every look that lasted a second too long, was starting to feel real. And for the first time, Lila Evans began to wonder, what if the bet that started this lie was about to become the truth neither of them expected? The following week moved like a slow dance of rules and rehearsed smile. Alexander Reed and Lila Evans lived under the same roof, yet their lives barely touched. The contract she had signed was framed in her mind like invisible glass. No real affection, no shared rooms, no personal questions. Still, something kept shifting between them, soft but undeniable. Each morning, Alexander's schedule unfolded with precision meetings, phone calls, charity appearances. Lila, meanwhile, learned the rhythm of the mansion. She spoke with the housekeeper, spent time in the garden, and studied the habits of the man she had married on paper. At breakfast, they sat across from each other at a table long enough to seat 12 people. Silverware glinted under morning light. Alexander read the paper. Lila stirred her coffee. The silence between them was not cold anymore. It was curious. One morning as she sliced a strawberry, she said quietly, "You know, I used to think rich people never ate breakfast. I imagined they survived on pride and stock dividends." Alexander looked up, surprised, then laughed a real laugh, sharp and brief. You are not completely wrong, he said, folding the paper, but even pride needs caffeine. The sound of his laughter filled the empty space like sunlight. Lila found herself smiling despite the walls she had built. Later that day, the mansion buzzed with preparations for an upcoming board dinner. Alexander's assistant, Clara, briefed Lila on etiquette. The directors will be watching you, she said. They will look for cracks. Be polite, but never apologetic. Lila nodded, nerves fluttering. That night, she stepped into the ballroom wearing a deep green gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. The dress was elegant but simple, her choice, not his stylist's. When Alexander saw her, his steps faltered for just a second. You clean up well, he said softly. I am not the one who needed cleaning up, she replied with a teasing smile. The dinner began. Conversations hummed with money, power, and quiet judgment. One of the senior partners leaned toward Lila and said, So, Mrs. Reed, what does a woman like you bring to a man like Alexander? Lila's pulse quickened. Before she could answer, Alexander spoke calmly. Perspective. Something our board could use more of. The partner blinked, embarrassed, while Lila tried not to smile. It was the first time he had defended her openly. After the dinner, they retreated to the balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool, carrying the hum of traffic far below. Lila leaned on the railing, looking at the skyline. You did not have to say that, she murmured. Alexander joined her side. I know, but I wanted to. He paused, his voice softer. You handled yourself well tonight. You did not let them see you flinch. She glanced at him. I learned from the best. You never flinch, even when you should. He smiled faintly. You think I am fearless? No, she said. I think you are afraid of feeling. Her words landed between them like truth too honest to ignore. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he exhaled, looking out at the dark stretch of the river. Maybe I am. The moment stretched, fragile and real. Lila's heart beat faster. She could see the man behind the armor, the one who had built walls, not out of arrogance, but out of hurt. Inside, the grandfather clock chimed 10. Lila straightened and said quietly, Good night, Alexander. He looked at her, eyes unreadable. Good night, Lila. The next morning, she found a note beside her coffee cup. Thank you for last night. Just 6 words, written in neat, deliberate handwriting. But they made her smile all through breakfast. Days turned into a quiet rhythm of companionship. They spoke more, laughed sometimes, shared small things, a story from her childhood, a rare memory from his. The staff noticed too. The house felt warmer, lighter. One rainy afternoon, when a thunderstorm rolled across the city, the power flickered out. Lila wandered into his office holding 2 candles. He was sitting by the window, rain streaking down the glass. Working in the dark? She teased. He looked up, smiling slightly. Habit? I do not like stopping. She set a candle on his desk. Maybe you should try it. Stopping, I mean. Just for one night. He watched her for a moment, then closed his laptop. You might be right. They sat together in the dim light, listening to the rain. For the first time, silence did not feel like distance. It felt like peace. And somewhere deep inside, both of them knew the lines of their contract were starting to blur. What began as a performance was becoming something real. Neither wanted to admit it yet, but every word, every shared glance, was rewriting the rules they thought would protect their hearts. The following days blurred together like the slow fade of summer light. What began as a performance for the public was quietly turning into something neither Alexander Reed nor Lila Evans could name. The rules that once felt clear were becoming softer, less certain. It started with little things. Alexander began taking breakfast at the smaller table instead of the long one. He asked Lila how she slept. He noticed when she wore her hair down, when she laughed too hard at the morning news. And she noticed him too, the way he loosened his tie after long meetings, the tired look in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. One evening, after a long day of board meetings, Alexander came home later than usual. Lila was in the library, curled up in an armchair, reading by the fire. She looked up as he entered. You look exhausted, she said softly. Meetings will do that to you, he replied, setting his briefcase down. I think half my job is just pretending to care about people who only care about money. She closed her book, tilting her head. You care more than you want to admit. He chuckled, shaking his head. You seem very sure about that. I see things, she said, even when people try to hide them. Alexander smiled faintly. Then you must see too much. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled softly between them. It was the kind of silence that carried warmth instead of distance. Later that week, they attended another event together, a charity auction at the Grand Marlow Hotel. The cameras followed them as they stepped out of the black car, her arm looped through his. Lila wore a navy gown that shimmered like water, elegant but unassuming. Alexander noticed the nervous tremor in her hand and gave it a light squeeze. "Just breathe," he murmured. "You belong here." "Oh." Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers glowed like constellations. Guests whispered, staring at them as the unlikely couple walked by. One reporter asked boldly, "Mr. Reed, do you believe in love at first sight?" Alexander's eyes flicked toward Lila. "I believe in surprises," he said simply. The answer made her blush, though she could not tell if he meant it or if it was just part of the show. During the auction, a painting was unveiled, an ocean sunrise. The artist had titled it New Beginnings. Lila whispered, "That is beautiful." Alexander glanced at the canvas, then at her. Without a word, he raised his hand and placed a bid that made the crowd gasp. When the auctioneer announced it as sold, Lila turned to him in disbelief. "You did not have to do that." "I wanted to," he said. "You reminded me of it." When they returned home, the painting was delivered the next morning. He hung it in the hallway outside her room. "So you will see it every day," he said. That night, Lila found herself staring at the painting long after he had gone to bed. The ocean looked endless, full of quiet hope. She did not know what scared her more, the idea that he had bought it for her, or the thought that it might mean something real. Days later, a storm rolled through the city. The rain came in waves, the thunder shaking the windows. Lila stood on the balcony, watching lightning trace the sky. She was lost in thought when Alexander stepped outside, holding an umbrella. "You will get soaked," he said. She smiled faintly. "It feels good to stand in the rain. Makes you remember you are alive." He hesitated, then joined her, closing the umbrella. Rain fell around them, cold and sharp, soaking his shirt, her hair. They both laughed, real laughter, unguarded and free. When the thunder faded, he said quietly, "I cannot remember the last time I did something without thinking about it first." "Then do not think," she whispered. For a moment, the world held still. Their eyes met, and in that fragile pause, the walls they had built finally cracked. His hand brushed hers, hesitant, questioning. She did not pull away. The sound of rain softened as the city glowed below them, blurred by mist. Everything about the moment felt dangerous and inevitable. When she finally stepped back, her voice trembled. "We should go inside." He nodded slowly. "Yes, we should." Neither spoke again that night, but something had changed. The distance between them, once necessary, now felt impossible to maintain. Later, in his office, Alexander stood by the window, dripping wet, staring at the reflection of the storm. He whispered to himself, "What are you doing, Reed?" But the answer was already clear. He was falling. And somewhere across the hall, Lila sat on the edge of her bed, her heart racing, knowing the same truth. The marriage might have started as a contract, but love was beginning to rewrite the terms. The next few days passed in silence, the kind that spoke louder than words. The rain had stopped, but the air between Alexander Reed and Lila Evans was heavy with everything left unsaid. They both tried to return to the rhythm of their separate routines, yet every glance, every accidental touch, carried the weight of the storm they had shared. On a quiet Wednesday morning, Lila walked into the kitchen to find Alexander already there, sleeves rolled up, pouring coffee. It was a simple sight, but something about it made her chest tighten. He looked up. "Good morning." "Good morning," she replied softly. There was a pause, not awkward, just careful. Then he surprised her. "I had the chef take the day off," he said. "I thought maybe you could teach me how to cook something that does not come with a price tag." She blinked. "You, cooking? That I need to see." His mouth curved slightly. "I am serious. Help me." So, she did. They stood side by side in the bright marble kitchen, sleeves rolled, hands messy with flour. Lila showed him how to make pancakes, teasing him each time he flipped one wrong. For the first time, Alexander looked less like a billionaire and more like a man trying to remember how to be human. When he accidentally dropped a spoon of batter onto the counter, she laughed so hard she had to hold on to the edge of the counter. He stared at her, something warm flickering in his chest. "You are beautiful when you laugh," he said quietly. The words hung between them, heavier than either expected. Her smile faded, replaced by a slow, trembling breath. "Do not say things like that," she whispered. "Why not?" he asked. "Because this is not real," she said. "It was never supposed to be." He nodded slowly, but his eyes did not agree. "Maybe not, but it feels real." She turned away before he could see the tears gathering in her eyes. Later that evening, they attended another corporate dinner. Lila had grown more confident at public events, but tonight something felt different. She could sense eyes on her, calculated, curious. At their table sat Damon Cole, the man who had started the bet. When Lila excused herself to step outside, Damon leaned toward Alexander with a smirk. "You really went through with it. I must admit, you play your roles well. Though I wonder, does she know she was part of a wager?" Alexander's blood ran cold. "Do not," he said sharply, but it was too late. Lila had returned in time to hear those last few words. Her voice was quiet but shaking. "A wager?" Alexander turned, face pale. "Lila, it is not what you think." Her eyes filled with disbelief. "Tell me, it is not true. Tell me you did not marry me because of a bet." The room seemed to spin. Cameras flashed in the distance, but all Alexander could see was her face hurt, betrayed, raw. "It started that way," he said, voice breaking. "But it is not anymore. I swear to you, it changed." She stepped back, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You promised me this was not a joke." "I meant it," he said. "I did not plan to—" "To what? To fall in love?" she snapped. "You do not even know what love is." Before he could speak again, she turned and walked out, the sound of her heels echoing across the marble floor. Alexander followed her outside into the rain-soaked night. "Lila, please listen to me." But she kept walking, her voice trembling. "You wanted control. You wanted to win. Well, congratulations, Alexander Reed. You won the bet. You just lost me." She climbed into a cab, the door slamming shut before he could reach her. The car drove off into the city lights, leaving him standing alone under the street lamp, rain pouring down once more. Inside the cab, Lila pressed her forehead to the window. The city blurred past, and she felt her heart splinter. Everything she had started to believe in had turned to dust. Back at the mansion, Alexander walked through the empty halls, every step echoing with regret. The ring she had worn lay on the marble counter beside a note she had left. "You taught me that love cannot be built on lies." He sank into the chair, staring at the ring, his reflection shimmering in the silver band. For the first time in years, Alexander Reed felt powerless. The empire he had built could not fix what he had broken. Days passed. Lila disappeared from the media. She quit the café, moved out of her apartment, and began volunteering at a small community center downtown. She wanted to forget him, but every time she saw the sunrise or heard the sound of rain, she remembered the man who had once stood beside her and almost meant it. And somewhere in his penthouse high above the city, Alexander watched that same rainfall, whispering the words he had never said out loud. "I am sorry." It was not the end of their story, but it was the night everything they had built finally shattered into truth. 3 weeks passed, and the city seemed quieter without her. The headlines had finally died down, but Alexander Reed's name remained a whisper on everyone's lips. Investors called less often, reporters stopped circling his building, yet his mind refused to rest. Every board meeting, every empty dinner, every night staring at the painting in the hallway reminded him of the one thing he could not fix. He had lost Lila Evans not because of pride, but because of a lie he had allowed to begin. One evening, his longtime assistant Clara entered the office, holding a folder. "Mr. Reed," she said softly, "there is something you should see." Inside were photographs Lila volunteering at a community center on the east side of the city. She was helping children paint murals on a crumbling wall, smiling as if she had never known him at all. Alexander's throat tightened. "She has been there every day," Clara said. "She is using part of the money you transferred to her account to help rebuild the place." He stared at the photo for a long time. The bright color of paint on her hands stood out against the gray concrete wall, a reminder that she had always been the one who brought life into dull spaces. That night, Alexander sat alone in his office, staring at the city lights. The bet had made him rich in laughter for a moment, but poor in everything that mattered. He whispered to himself, "What do you do when the only person who ever saw the real you will not even look your way?" The answer came in silence. He stood, opened his laptop, and began typing a new project proposal, the Integrity Program, a foundation for honest leadership, community growth, and education funding for underprivileged women. He poured every ounce of sincerity into it. No media spectacle, no brand gain, just redemption. Days turned into weeks of planning. He met with social workers, donors, and architects. Every document bore his personal signature. Every meeting carried one condition: no press until the first event. When the day finally came, the community center where Lila worked had been transformed. Fresh walls, new bookshelves, computers for the children. And on the main sign, newly painted in blue and gold, were the words, "The Reed Foundation Built on Integrity." Lila arrived early that morning, unaware of what was waiting. She stopped on the sidewalk, eyes widening as she saw the renovations. The place looked brand new, yet familiar. Then she noticed a small card taped beside the entrance. "This was never about a bet. It is about making right what I broke. A.R." Her breath caught. Inside, volunteers were busy setting up tables for the grand reopening. The staff whispered that the donor would visit later, but no one knew who it was. Lila tried to focus on her work, but her hands trembled as she arranged art supplies. At noon, she heard the familiar hum of an engine outside. She turned, and there he was, Alexander Reed, standing in the doorway. No bodyguards, no photographers, just a man holding a bouquet of white lilies. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The sound of children laughing filled the space between them. "Why are you here?" she asked finally. He took a slow breath. "Because I needed to see what real love builds when ego steps aside." She looked at the new walls, the bright murals, the stacks of donated supplies. "You did this?" He nodded. "You once told me that money changes where you stand, but not who you are. You were right. I wanted to prove that I could use what I have to stand somewhere better." Lila's voice softened. "Why now?" "Because I cannot undo the lie," he said. "But I can live in the truth from now on. I did not ask you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what it means to care." She looked down, blinking away tears. "You do not have to buy forgiveness, Alexander." "I am not," he said quietly. "I am earning peace." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she noticed the children gathered around the mural, waiting to add their final strokes. "Do you want to help?" she asked. He smiled for the first time in weeks. "Tell me what to do." They stood side by side, dipping brushes into bright paint. The children giggled as he smudged a streak of blue across the wall. For the first time, laughter returned to his voice, pure, uncalculated. When the painting was done, he stepped back to look at it. Across the wall stretched a sunrise bursting from behind the words, "New Beginnings." Lila glanced at him. "You remembered the painting from the auction." "I never forgot it," he said. For the first time since that night, she smiled not out of pity or confusion, but with quiet understanding. As the afternoon sun poured through the windows, the light touched them both, soft and forgiving. Alexander whispered, "Maybe second chances are not given. Maybe they are built." And Lila answered, "Then keep building." The walls that had once separated them were gone now, replaced by something steadier, hope. He did not reach for her hand yet. He knew it was not time. But for the first time in his life, Alexander Reed felt that love was not about winning. It was about becoming someone worthy of being forgiven. 2 months later, the Reed Foundation had become the heartbeat of the East Side. The community center was thriving, children were laughing, and new programs had started to grow. But for Alexander Reed, success meant nothing without Lila Evans beside him. They spoke occasionally, always polite, always distant. She thanked him for the work he had done, and he thanked her for inspiring it. Yet neither dared to mention what still lingered between them. One evening, the foundation hosted a charity gala to celebrate its first milestone. The ballroom glowed again, but this time the lights felt different, warmer, humbler. Lila had not planned to attend, yet Clara convinced her. "You helped start this," she said. "You should see what you built." So, Lila arrived quietly, wearing a simple ivory dress. As she stepped through the doors, conversation slowed. She was no longer the girl from the café. She was the woman who had changed a billionaire's life. Alexander was on stage, finishing his speech. "Integrity is not about never falling," he said, voice steady. "It is about standing again with honesty." When his eyes found Lila in the crowd, his words faltered for just a second. Applause filled the room. As the guests turned to mingle, Alexander stepped down from the stage and crossed the floor toward her. For a heartbeat, everything else faded: the music, the chatter, the flash of cameras. "You came," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "I almost did not." "I am glad you did," he said. "There is something I have been waiting to say." He motioned to the host, who dimmed the lights. A video began to play on the screen behind them, scenes from the Foundation's journey: children painting, women starting small businesses, volunteers, rebuilding homes. The final image appeared: a simple photograph of the mural they had painted together, the sunrise over the words "New Beginnings." Then Alexander's voice echoed through the speakers, pre-recorded yet trembling with sincerity. "This project began as an apology, but today it stands as proof that love can build what pride once destroyed, and none of it would exist without one woman who believed in kindness when I did not." When the lights came back up, Alexander was holding something in his hand. It was the silver ring, the same one Lila had worn when their marriage was just a contract. "This time," he said softly, "there is no bet, no deal, no signature. Just a man asking the woman he loves if she can believe in him again." Lila's eyes filled with tears. The crowd had gone silent. She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You really do not give up, do you?" He smiled. "Not when it comes to what is real." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, with trembling hands, she reached out and took the ring. The applause that followed was quiet at first, then rose like a wave. As he slipped the ring onto her finger again, Alexander whispered, "This time, it means forever." Lila looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes. "Then let us see what forever really looks like." The music swelled, and the crowd cheered, but neither of them heard it. They were lost in the same promise that had broken them once, and now bound them together again, not by contract, but by choice. The night that began with redemption ended with truth, and for Alexander Reed and Lila Evans, new beginnings were no longer words on a wall. They were a life they would build together. The next morning, sunlight poured across the city, warm and forgiving. News of the gala spread quickly. Headlines read, "Billionaire redeems himself with a public apology and a real proposal." But for Alexander Reed and Lila Evans, the world outside no longer mattered. What began as a contract had turned into a love story written not by money or power, but by the courage to begin again. They decided to keep their second wedding private, away from flashing cameras and gossip columns. "No photographers, no headlines," Alexander had said. "Just us." Lila agreed, smiling softly. "This time, let it be real." Weeks later, the ceremony took place inside the community center, the very place that had changed both of their lives. The same mural painted months ago stood behind them, the colors still bright, the sunrise still glowing over the words "New Beginnings." Guests were few: Clara, the staff from the foundation, and the children who had helped paint the walls. The air smelled of fresh flowers and candle wax. There were no diamonds, no gold chandeliers, no orchestra. Only the quiet hum of joy and the soft strumming of a guitar played by one of the volunteers. Lila wore a simple white dress. Her hair was tied loosely, and her hands trembled as she held the small bouquet of lilies, the same flowers Alexander had brought the day he returned to her. Alexander stood across from her in a gray suit, no tie, his eyes never leaving hers. When the officiant asked for their vows, Alexander took a deep breath. "Lila, you once told me that love built on lies will never last. You were right. I broke something precious because I did not know how to be honest with my own heart. But you taught me that truth is not weakness. It is the foundation of everything worth keeping. I do not want to win anymore. I just want to deserve you." Lila's voice trembled as she replied, "Alexander, you were the last person I expected to love, but every wall you tore down showed me the man you really are. You turned regret into kindness and shame into hope. And I realized that forgiveness is not about forgetting, it is about choosing to love anyway." The officiant smiled. "You may exchange the rings." Alexander took the silver ring from his pocket, the same one that had once been part of a lie. "It started as a symbol of a deal," he said, sliding it onto her finger. "Now it is a promise that everything we build will be real." Lila slipped a simple band onto his hand. "And this," she said, "is for the man who kept building, even when he thought he had nothing left." When they kissed, the children clapped, and a few cried without knowing why. Outside, sunlight streamed through the stained windows, landing on the mural like a blessing. After the ceremony, they walked through the garden behind the center. The air was filled with the scent of rain from the night before. Alexander stopped, pulling something from his pocket, a folded page from her old journal. On it were her words, written months ago. "Happiness is not a contract. It is kindness, kept alive." "I kept this," he said. "It reminded me of who I wanted to become." Lila smiled through tears. "Then you became him." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "No, you helped me find him." As the camera of life panned wide, they stood in the same place where their story had broken and rebuilt it with their own hands. The fake marriage that began as a bet ended as a vow of truth. And in the soft glow of morning, Alexander Reed and Lila Evans finally stepped into the life they had both been searching for, one not measured in wealth, but in the courage to love and to start again. Months passed, and life slowly settled into a rhythm neither of them had ever known before. The world still called him a millionaire, but Alexander Reed no longer lived for titles or headlines. His mornings began with coffee shared across the same small table where laughter replaced silence. Lila Evans was no longer the girl from the café. She was his wife, his partner, and the quiet heartbeat that reminded him what truly mattered. The Reed Foundation continued to grow, reaching new neighborhoods, helping families find work, and rebuilding forgotten schools. Alexander no longer signed documents just for profit, he signed them for people. And every time he cut a ribbon or funded a new program, Lila was there beside him, smiling with the same warmth that had changed everything. One late afternoon, they visited the community center again. The mural still gleamed on the wall, sunlight dancing over the words, "New Beginnings." Children ran past them, laughing. Lila turned to him, her eyes soft. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been if that bet had never happened?" Alexander smiled, his hand brushing hers. "I think about it every day, and every time, I thank fate for being cruel enough to teach me kindness." She laughed softly. "That is an odd way to describe love." He nodded. "Maybe, but it is ours." They stood together in the quiet, surrounded by the hum of life they had helped create. The same silver ring caught the light as he reached for her hand. "You know," he said, "I used to believe love was something to win. Now I know it is something to protect." Lila squeezed his hand. "Then protect it well, Mr. Reed." He smiled, the corners of his eyes creasing with warmth. "With everything I am, Mrs. Reed." "Oh." As the sun sank behind the skyline, the golden light wrapped around them, soft and endless. The world outside kept moving, cars, voices, stories, but for Alexander and Lila, time finally slowed. They had walked through lies, pride, loss, and redemption, only to discover that love built on truth did not fade, it grew stronger with every scar it healed. And as the day melted into night, Lila rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, This feels like home." Alexander looked toward the mural, the painted sunrise forever shining on the wall, and answered quietly, "It is, because this time we built it with honesty." The camera of life pulled back one last time. The man who had once bet against love now stood as proof that second chances are real and that the richest hearts are the ones brave enough to change.